First, let's look at the so-called Horn of Africa. Valued through history for its strategic position, commanding the approaches to the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. In the past decade, our once staunch ally, Ethiopia, has turned against us, recently ordering Americans out of the country. Somalia, its neighbor, which flirted with the Russians in the past, is now more friendly to us, while the Ethiopians have been cozying up to the Russians. 10 years ago, Tom Farrer was an advisor to the Somalian police force. He's a member of the Inter-American Human Rights Commission now. He's worked for both the Defense and State Departments and is now also a professor of international law at Rutgers University. Mr. Farrer, is the Horn still strategic today? And incidentally, why is it called the Horn? Just because it looks like one?
I have always assumed that, Robin. As I conclude in my book, today it's an area of secondary, or in my judgment, even tertiary strategic significance. It's all relative. Relative to Southern Africa, relative to a dozen other places in the world, secondary or tertiary significance. It had an importance back in 1953 when we entered into a 25-year military support agreement with Ethiopia. And its main importance was an intelligence gathering and military communications base on the coast of the Red Sea, Asmara, in the province of Eritrea, where the civil war has been going on for over a decade. The changes in technology, satellite technology, have pretty much made redundant that facility. And we've now been ordered to close it, but within the past year we haven't had more than 50 or 60 civilians there. We used to have as many as 1,800.
So we can keep an eye on the Russian naval movements and that sort of thing just as well by satellites now as we could in the past by bases there. Is that the idea?
Satellites and other facilities that we have. Now, several years ago, when it was clear that the Russians had established a facility in Somalia, a fairly sizable naval support facility.
That was down here.
Well, it was a little bit higher up, towards the tip of the Horn, in Berbera, right about there. A number of national news magazines and the Defense Department indicated great concern about the area. And I remember C.L. Sulzberger in the Times saying that the Soviets now dominated the entrance to the Red Sea and access to the Suez Canal because they were influential both across the strait there, Strait of Bab el-Mandeb in southern Yemen, or the PDRY it's called, and had this facility in Somalia. And of course the question is, does that geography really make a difference, even assuming that you have facilities on both sides? I mean, one doesn't close off narrow bodies of water anymore by dragging chains across them.
Does it make a difference?
No, I don't think it makes a great deal of difference. Of course, today we begin to see political change in the area. The Somalis, you said that the Somalis are shifting in our direction. We think they're beginning to shift in our direction. It's quite clear that the Soviet Union is going to try to serve as a mediator between the Somalis and the Ethiopians, who are age-old enemies. I mean, the conflict on the Horn is basically a very indigenous kind of thing. It's millennial, in fact.
What does the present situation there, and the Ethiopians kicking us out, say about the efficacy of U.S. policy towards that part of Africa at the moment?
Well, one could argue that it's a good thing that the Ethiopians are kicking us out. Ethiopia is no longer of great value to us. I think
Haile Selassie, our former friend, being gone. And
even if he were there, I think that the major significance of Ethiopia was the base. The base is no longer very significant. Ethiopia is one of the 10 poorest countries in the world by almost any kind of measure. There are no significant resources there. The present Ethiopian government is violating human rights on a massive scale.
Which we've said, very pointedly.
Which we have conceded a little grudgingly and belatedly, but it's true. And we were reluctant to cut off the military pipeline. So in a sense, they are relieving us of what had become an increasingly unattractive obligation of support.
And how are the Russians exploiting that situation?
Well, the Russians, as I said, have facilities there in Berbera. There are other potential facilities in that area, and possibly they would like to take advantage of all of the possible facilities. The question, in a sense, they're trying to do in the Horn what we are trying to do in the Middle East. That is to serve both as the friend of the Arabs and the Israelis. On the Horn, they are trying to ride the Ethiopian horse and the Somali horse, or perhaps I should say the one-humped camel. And it's a pretty open question whether they can do it. Because the principal interest of the Ethiopians, I think, in improving relations with the Soviet Union is to draw Soviet support away from the Somalis. And the principal reason for the Somalis giving the Soviets a facility in Somalia is to draw Soviet support for their conflict with the Ethiopians. So it's going to be a rather difficult task for the Russians.
Thank you.